Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, where we explore the unexplained and mysterious phenomena that have occurred throughout the state of Michigan and beyond.
From UFO sightings to ghostly encounters, we delve deep into the stories, the evidence, and the theories behind these strange events.
We are your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Wayne.
We are an educator duo that after an encounter with a triangular UFO in 2018 in Michigan, we decided to investigate UFOs and the paranormal. In this podcast, we will be speaking with eyewitnesses, experts, and researchers to uncover the truth about some of the most intriguing cases of paranormal activity in and around Michigan.
Our goal is not to convince anyone of the existence of these phenomena, but rather to provide a platform for discussion and exploration. So, buckle up and join us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole.
On an escalator.
Hello.
Hello there.
How's it sounding out there, everybody? Hopefully everything sounds good. And we want to welcome you once again. So good evening and welcome back to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. And once again, we're coming to you from the shadow of the great Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. It is March 15th.
March Madness, folks.
March Madness. It's UFO time. Keep your eyes to that sky, remember. And it's 2026. And tonight we're exploring the mysteries that challenge what we think we know about our world and our history. So we're going to have a great show for you tonight. One of the things we want to tell you right up front is please remember to like, share, and subscribe and share us out to everybody. And want to thank T-Bone in chat for putting that out there early for us. And we always forget to say it, and we have our little tickers and stuff that run at the bottom of the screen, but just so you guys can hear it. All right. The other thing we need to cover real quick is two pieces of news. So the Swamp Gas My Ass special presentation celebrating the 60th anniversary of the famous Dexter Ann Arbor swamp gas UFO that Ray Szymanski totally debunked is happening on March 20th and 21st, so this week, but it's sold out. It's packed and standing room only. So hopefully you guys got signed up for that and you're ready for that. So it's going to be awesome. Michelle and I are going to be there in person
on Saturday.
On Saturday. Yep. And then another piece of information, the MUFON Symposium that's happening this year is August 27th through the 30th. And guess who's a speaker? Alex Dietrich. Yep. Mark St. Germain. Yep. We have Katie Page. Yep. But the one, the only, our favorite investigator from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ray Szymanski, is going to be part of the MUFON Symposium this year. So congrats to Ray. He's been sitting on this information for a while, and we wanted to get that out to you guys. With all that being said, we're going to turn our attention to one of the most famous structures on Earth, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For centuries, mainstream archaeology has told us that the pyramid was built as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu around 4,500 years ago. I'm going to snicker a little bit at that because there's no way. But despite decades of study, many questions remain unanswered. How were the massive stones transported and lifted with such precision? And yes, they are very precise. Why does the internal architecture appear so complex and functional? It does have a weird, like, mechanical feel to it. And perhaps most importantly, why was the pyramid really built? Our guest tonight, Stephen Myers, believes the Great Pyramid may have served a very different purpose entirely. Rather than a symbolic monument or burial structure, Myers proposes that the pyramid may have been an advanced engineering device, a massive, now this is the first time I've heard this one, I've heard electricity and things before. But a massive hydraulic system designed to pump water. He calls the concept the prosperity machine.
I don't know, makes sense.
Makes sense.
All right, so a little bit about Stephen Myers, working with an international research foundation and think tank. Stephen and his team have been studying the pyramid from an engineering perspective, looking at how the structure could have functioned mechanically and how water transport systems like barges, locks, and canals might have played a role in its construction and operation. Tonight, we'll explore this fascinating... My mic was off.
Start over.
Uh-huh. I had a feeling before anybody said anything in chat, and maybe they did. So, about Stephen Myers. Working with an international research foundation and think tank, Stephen and his team have been studying the pyramid from an engineering perspective, looking at how the structure could have functioned mechanically and how water transport systems like barges, locks, and canals might have played a role in its construction and operation. Tonight, we'll explore this fascinating theory and ask some big questions about ancient engineering, lost technologies, and whether our ancestors may have been capable of far more sophisticated projects than we currently believe. So, if you're interested in ancient mysteries, hidden history, and the possibility that humanity's past may be far more advanced than we've been told, you're in the right place.
That's right.
So please welcome our guest tonight, Stephen Myers.
All right, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. We are very happy to have you on board. And we want to start out with just a little bit of background. So for viewers who may not be familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what first, and this is where I'm really interested, what first drew you to the study of the Great Pyramid?
Well, I actually have a rather technical background. I have the FCC general class, commercial radio telephone license, amateur radio operator, other degrees and certificates. So my interest has always been technology. I've got several of those old one-lunger engines, that they used to have on farms. And in high school, when they studied World War II, I was more interested in the planes and the battleships and the tanks and all of that instead of the generals or the politics.
Yep.
So I've had a technical background, and people with a technical background, you would think, and history, I like history, would ultimately have an interest in the Great Pyramid because it's a very technical structure, that required quite a bit of engineering, built in distant antiquity. So it's a 45-story skyscraper that almost defies understanding. But I'm sure the people that built it understood everything that they wanted to about it. They had no mysteries about the Great Pyramid, about how it was built and why, but it is the honor and duty of modern researchers to understand what was common knowledge back when it was built.
Yeah. So what moment or discovery made you start questioning the traditional exploration that the pyramid was simply a tomb?
Oh, well, I'm just like anybody. I watched the TV shows about the big ramp. And when I started, you'd have to go down to the library and check out a book. It was before the internet and all of that. So you go down and check out these books and, written by educated people, Egyptologists and everything else, who claim to be scientists. And they talk about how the stones were made, quarried, the hammer and chisel.
Yeah.
And then with the hammer and chisel, they could create those great big casing stones that are precision cut and massive, 16 tons in some cases. So, okay, that makes sense. But I found out an interesting secret about Egyptology, and that science doesn't engage in the scientific method. They don't, they tell these stories, they have a hypothesis and all of that, but they never they never have a demonstration of
Yeah.
how they say it was done. They've never made a casing stone. They've never made a surface of a casing stone. They've never moved a 70-ton barge, or excuse me, a 70-ton stone, the largest stone, 1 inch. They've never done it. So I thought that's really odd for a science not to use the scientific method. And then they also do what I call pseudo demonstrations, these really odd demonstrations. They'll move a 1.5-ton stone a few feet and then say that's how 70-ton stones were moved. And that's very disingenuous. You know what disingenuous means?
Oh, yeah.
It means that it's
made up,
false and a type of lie. I can demonstrate how I can pick up a full-size car but pick up a Hot Wheels car and say that's how I pick up a full-size car.
Right.
Well, that's not a very good demonstration, but Egyptologists do that type of thing all the time.
Yeah.
So I had myself and a lot of alternative researchers have quite a disdain for traditional Egyptology for a whole host of reasons.
Yep.
So I looked at alternative ideas like the Great Pyramid was some sort of a beacon for aliens or some sort of a weapon or a whole host of other ideas. But then I read this book called Pharaoh's Pump by Edward Kunkel, and he, no symbolism, no anything. He talked about how stones were moved and why the Great Pyramid was built. And that started my quest on researching this massive enigmatic structure that's in the Valley of the Nile.
Yeah. With that being mentioned, and we were just mentioning Ray Szymanski's presentation coming up at the Dexter Library, he made a comment on one of my Facebook posts about the show happening tonight. And he says, and I know exactly where he's coming from with this. He says, there are an estimated 2.3 million super huge blocks of stones in the Great Pyramid. The experts claim it took 20 years to build. Doing some simple mathematics using the 20-year claim, builders would have to lay perfectly multi-ton stones every 60 seconds, 8 hours a day for 20 years, 7 days a week. Some of those stones are at an elevation of nearly 500 feet. Someone with some common sense I'm not talking archaeologist here, explain how this is even remotely possible in the super hot weather or any other time of that year. I'll wait. So he had a very interesting approach to that. And I want to ask you about your research. And your research approaches the pyramid from an engineering standpoint. So what happens when engineers analyze the structure rather than the archaeologist?
Well, no matter what, it's an engineering project. The Notre Dame has a religious purpose, but it was an engineering project to build. The Empire State Building, as an economic purpose, to make money, but it was an engineering project to build. Battleships, served a purpose, but to build them, it was an engineering project. So a lot of people say, well, you can't even look at it that way, but you can. There's nothing really esoteric or religious about moving heavy payloads from one place to another. But we think that they used water locks, like in the Erie Canal, barges, and the buoyancy of water, and were able to move stones effortlessly. And it was amazing. The Erie Canal was able to move 70-ton payloads on barges, and it had a capacity of moving the weight of the Great Pyramid and lifting it higher than the Great Pyramid in 2 years. So Egyptology, if they were going to build the Great Pyramid, the time it would take would be infinity, because they've never moved a single casing stone or made a casing stone or anything like that. So it would never be done. It's just like if you would ask an cow jump over the moonologist how long it would take to demonstrate a cow jumping over the moon, it would be the same amount of time as it would take Egyptologists to build the Great Pyramid, because it can't be done. But anyway,
Right.
so water locks, yeah, effortlessly. They are the 21st century high technology of choice to move our most heaviest objects. The Erie Canal became too small for our largest ships, so they built a bigger canal down in Panama. You know, they didn't use a magic wand. They didn't drag payloads up a ramp or anything like that. They were engineers, and they had a responsibility to actually accomplish something in the real world, which is to move cargo from one place to another. So they enlarged, or built, actually, they built an extra Panama Canal. And so that's what we think was done. And the Great Pyramid is the result of the work the geniuses did so long ago.
So with the hydraulic locks and water barges, for people that aren't very familiar with how that would work, how would that system work exactly?
Well, you just have a canal, you know, like at this level, and then another canal at this level, and then a water lock between the two, and you could communicate or move the ship up by adding water in this enclosed area, and then the cargo can go in a higher level, and then you can have flights, a series of water locks, and go up high. At Lockport, New York, they had originally 5 water locks in a series, and they were able to transport all of that cargo from the Hudson River into the Great Lakes through the Erie Canal.
So very similar to like what we have here in Michigan. Up north, we have the Sault Ste. Marie, or what we call the Soo locks.
Yes.
And it works kind of similar to that.
Yeah, that technology is very scalable. You know, there's some pretty small water locks, even though they're commercial, that were built like in England. And then there's, you know, the St. Lawrence Seaway up there,
Yep.
which essentially replaced the Erie Canal. So there are big ones, little ones, and that type of thing. And we think that there were water locks that actually went up the side of the Great Pyramid during construction. It was built level by level, you know, from the bottom up, including casing stones. So we have a video series on our website at thepump.org with a lot of demonstrations showing how this process, very sophisticated, but very elegant, how they were able to move stones effortlessly, how they were able to take stones off the barge and to its final resting place, and that type of thing, using the powerful force of water's buoyancy.
Okay. So just everybody that's watching in chat there, you will see the link to thepump.org if you guys want to go and check that out after the show, and go watch some of those videos. Very interesting. All right. So when it comes to like the brute labor and the whole ramp idea and stuff, why do you think the hydraulic method makes more sense?
Well, several reasons. First, it's consistent with the direct physical evidence. There's a lot of evidence that indicates there's a profound link between water and the Great Pyramid. So, you know, that all of that would be a whole show in itself. Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by a lake, by water. And some say, well, that's a metaphor type of thing, but we think there was an enclosure wall around the Great Pyramid that had water in it. Sir Flanders Petrie found what he called Nile earth, but sediment inside the Great Pyramid, which would make sense. The casing stones are cemented together with a strong bonding agent, watertight, and those that still remain are still cemented together. And that's part of the construction process. But also, I think it's more, it makes more sense because the methods that Egyptology has come up with cannot be demonstrated. And that's a factor. Egyptologists say, oh yeah, this is how peasants and working people, they made casing stones, and they did that all day long. They had that copper chisel, and they pounded, but then Egyptologists can't do that. So
those guys,
they stop at a hypothesis.
Yeah,
and then that's as good as it gets. So and no one else does it the way they say it was done. So that's really strange that they can get away with such a thing like that.
Yeah. So speaking of evidence, because I was just talking to my students about this, about having inference versus evidence, and then the quality of your evidence, and how that all works out. What piece of evidence do you think that supports your claim the most people do not know about at all? Like, everybody knows about the shafts that are in there and the black box that's in there at a certain dimension and things like that. But is there one or two pieces of evidence that really point to this thing was some type of or built with hydraulics, first of all, and then it was some type of a pump that we'll get into in a little bit that nobody knows about?
Well,
it's not mainstream.
Well, I'm not sure I know what you're saying. I'm a researcher. All the researchers I know, have the evidence that's available. That big pile of rocks in Egypt, that's evidence. Certainly, there are different interpretations of the same direct physical evidence. But I mentioned several things that indicate the profound link between water and the Great Pyramid, the doability of it, the consistent with the direct physical evidence, and also that it's a large return on investment. Being a water pump is, a lot of people say that's the largest return on investment for the cost of building the Great Pyramid. So, a lot of people don't look at it that way. But I just a lot of people think that it's compelling, that the features inside the Great Pyramid that we think were a water pump, and it doesn't make sense for a tomb, but a lot of those features we give a functional purpose to, that a lot of people that look into it think it's compelling. So it's interesting. I was at the wrecking yard the other day getting some parts, believe it or not, and there was a V8 engine block. It had 8 cylinders. Well, each one of those cylinders point to stars. Okay, the engine block is evidence. The idea that they point to stars is an interpretation of evidence. Well, there's another interpretation of the evidence, is that those cylinders were part of a functioning machine. So a lot of people confuse evidence with, an interpretation of evidence.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the most fascinating aspects of your research is this idea that it functioned as a water pump, or what is called the prosperity machine. So can you explain that concept of I think you were kind of hinting at it here a little bit, but could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, some leader of a civilization decided to spend a lot of resources to pile these rocks on top of each other. Well, They did that, and there was a return on investment. There was a reason for them to do it. And the reason was really small. It didn't have any, it didn't really help anybody. No, that doesn't make sense. The original builders were geniuses, and everything that's built has a return on investment, or hopefully should have. And we think that pumped water served a lot of purposes. It probably powered machinery of various types. It generated electricity, the machineries. It created compressed air that you can use for a host of purposes, in industrial applications, that type of thing. And more high technology, you can transform the desert into a garden, and a whole host of other things that you can use the pumped water for. Hydroelectric dams, all they do is move electrons through a wire. Electrons go through a wire. But those electrons, you can do, you can charge your laptop and your phone and heat your home. So the Great Pyramid, we think, pumped water, and there was a host of things that pumped water was used for. I see the Giza Plateau as originally a science center or industrial park, more than just a graveyard.
So what is your idea about the internal chambers and like the passageways? How do those contribute to like a hydraulic function, or did they have a different function?
No, the entirety of the Great Pyramid served to pump water. There's long open passages and doors on pivots, which makes it kind of like a pipe, and valves. And I ask Egyptologists, how do long open passages and doors on pivots, how does that protect the pharaoh's carcass? And they never give a good answer for that. They don't have an answer. All they want to do is steal treasure from a grave. But anyway, all of those passages and chambers acted as like a water pump. Water went from the upper end of the descending passage down into the subterranean chamber, which used the force of implosion that Victor Schauberger discovered and utilized. He was an Austrian researcher in the 1930s and 40s, very fascinating person. And he used the power of water to do a whole host of things. But the implosion caused the water to go up to the bottom of the descent of the Grand Gallery. And there they separated oxygen and hydrogen using electrolysis. And those two gases, when combined, are quite volatile. And they ignited those gases, which ultimately results in a vacuum, which drew water up the Grand Gallery. And then ultimately, through valves and other processes, it went through the Queen's Chamber and then up through the King's Chamber and exited the King's Chamber vents. So it's quite involved. We have another video series with quite a few computer-generated animations describing the features of the Great Pyramid and how they relate to pumping water.
Okay. Well, real quick, I just want to thank T-Bone for the 5 gifted memberships. So congratulations if you received one of those. Thank you, T-Bone. We really appreciate your support, as always. And, a lot of people, we've talked to Ben Van Kerkwick. We've had Randall Carlson on here. We didn't get to the pyramids so much with Randall. We were talking more about the thunderstorm machine and all that jazz that he's working on, a little bit of Atlantis. But when do you think all of this was actually done? Was it really 4,500 years ago? Or are we talking about a civilization that was pre-Ice Age, that was around? What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, when the Great Pyramid was built is not the focus of my research. My research is about how and why. I know people that have studied when the Great Pyramid was built for, their whole career. But let's say we've determined the Great Pyramid was built 10,000 years ago. The starting date for the construction of the Great Pyramid was 10,000 years ago from today's date. Let's just say we determined that. Well, the very next question you would ask is, well, how did they build it?
Yeah.
And why would they do such a thing? So I concentrate on those. But when is really an interesting subject, because if you say it was built by the ancient Egyptians, well, that's called a hypothesis. All you need to do is demonstrate that culture, and we know a lot about ancient Egyptian culture and technology, how they were able to make a Great Pyramid casing stone. And the experts in the field, Egyptologists, know how it was done. They take a copper chisel and they go, boop, 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 and then you can make large scale precision stone cutting. It's all It's in their books. They teach it in universities right now, but they don't demonstrate it. So if the Egyptian culture can't make those large scale precision stone cutting to make casing stones, then they are ruled out. So it would have to be earlier. And a lot of people think it was done pre-flood, if you will, if you want to use that term, or pre-last catastrophe, pre-ice age, and I'm open to all of those possibilities. I'm open to anything that Egyptologists disagree with.
Well, since you bring that up, we have a question here from T-Bone. As a matter of fact, he says he wants to know Stephen's opinion of Zahi Hawass, speaking of Egyptologists.
Well, he's the most famous Egyptian in the world. So he's got that going for him. And he, was the head of the antiquities department in Egypt for a long time. And he has a nice hat. He's got a lot better hat than I have. I don't have a very good hat. So, but he certainly doesn't engage in the scientific method. He tells stories about the big ramp that had to be bigger than the Great Pyramid itself, to drag these stones up, but can't demonstrate it. And, he is also, he and all of Egyptology is known for not working well with other people. Dr. Robert Schoch talked about the age of the Sphinx, and they, hurled personal insults, viscerated him, tried to character destroy him, and that type of thing, and on and on and on, and that's not science, if you will. People that do that, and you can ask Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock. How's those Egyptologists to work with? Yeah. And they will tell you the same thing. So Egyptology is about the last of the 18th century sciences that still exist. It's actually the richest science in the world, with all of its museums, space, and departments of Egyptology and priceless artifacts and that type of thing. So money's no object. They could buy some copper chisels and make a Great Pyramid casing stone. Railroad locomotives and Abram A1 tanks weigh about 70 tons. So there's no shortage of 70-ton payloads. All they got to do is take the wheels off a locomotive, drag it up a dirt ramp, and that would invalidate my research.
Yeah.
I would be nothing. But they won't do that because they can't do it. The largest stone most Egyptologists have ever moved is the one in their kidney. So,
well played, sir. Well
you know,
played.
I'm just telling you, you
Yeah.
know, let's say a guy was an expert on making wooden barrels. Okay. And he had an explanation for how wooden barrels were made, but nobody on earth could make a wooden barrel the way he said it was made. That wouldn't be very impressive. Egyptology is the same way. You know, they have an explanation of how it was done. It, you know, it can't be demonstrated. So that science, Egyptology, is, I think, in crisis right now, and is losing its, its credibility. So
Yeah.
we're in a revolution of ideas, and that's one of the things that's going to change.
Yep. Well, outside of the obvious like money aspect of why they tell this story about Egypt and the hammer and chisels and stuff, what do you think they're hiding? It just feels like that they're lying and being disingenuous, like you said earlier, to perpetuate this story that people just aren't buying anymore. And I get, you want to bring people in tourism and bring money in, and this is a cool story. Oh, here. Do you think that they're hiding the fact that they really don't know and they've just been wasting money and time? Or is there something more going on here?
That's interesting. You would say that, because you don't say that about mathematics. You don't say that about geology. You don't say that about all kinds of other sciences. But when Egyptology comes up, the question is why are they lying? But there's a lot to it. There's a lot of things I can touch on. When the Piltdown skull was discovered, the best anthropologists in the world did their doctoral theses on it, and they taught it in universities, the Piltdown skull, and there it is, it's an artifact, missing link, it's right there. But it happened to have visible file marks on it. These experts couldn't see that. And it took 40 years for the science of anthropology to say, oh, there's file marks on there. And the reason why it took 40 years is all those anthropologists that did their doctoral thesis on it and taught it in universities and wrote their books about it, all those highly regarded experts had to die off. And then the next generation of anthropologists, the Piltdown skull is a forgery. So, but nobody changed their minds. And it's just the nature of the human condition. And Egyptology is the same way. Egyptologists sit in a classroom being taught by a generally older Egyptologist. And after enough ass time in universities, they become an Egyptologist. And it's more like a mystery religion, a cult, that they have the same story that they're telling. Egyptology is a science that has stagnated, if you will. And it's, they have their own high priests like Zui Hawass.
Yeah.
And they have, they circle the wagons when they're threatened and that type of thing. A Max Planck, a famous scientist, said that science actually advances funeral by funeral.
Yeah,
what this world needs right now is some more funerals of Egyptologists to help pursue truth.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I remember Max Planck. I reading that quote. It's like science advances one dead scientist at a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the Great Pyramid was thought to be, this is in the 19th, early 20th century, to be built for the purpose of confirming Bible prophecy. They have the Bethlehem angle and the pyramid inch that they came up with. They taught that in universities and colleges, and the Bible talks about huge structures in Egypt, and the Great Pyramid is a huge structure in Egypt, and those structures were granaries. Well, they decided that the Great Pyramid was a kind of a granary of knowledge, if you will, where knowledge was stored. And this is pyramidology, or that the Great Pyramid was the Bible in stone. Well, they used to teach that in universities too, and that has lost favor for a lot of reasons. The main reason is that it was based on some very poor research methods, and Egyptology is faced with some of those same problems. Very poor research methods, very sloppy research, no demonstrations, that type of thing. So we'll see. We're in a revolution of ideas right now.
Yeah, moving at the speed of light too. I mean, it's really amazing with the internet and doing shows like this and people getting their ideas out there. And yeah, it's rapidly changing, and I really enjoy seeing how people are experimenting with new technologies. And we recently had the scans of the pyramid, and I wanted to kind of bring that up to you as well. I don't know where you stand on the structures that are supposedly under the pyramid, but if you're talking like the water pump idea, it seems like that might be some kind of structures that would help with evidence to prove your point. Have you looked into that at all?
There's a lot of scans associated with the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau with a whole bunch of different technologies. These most recent LiDAR scans that they've come up with, certainly interesting, using satellite data, and some of that is analyzed in a proprietary manner, if you will. And so that's hard. It's hard to verify by any means. I think that they are. Here's an old euphemism. They are leading with the chin a little bit, kind of getting ahead of themselves with all of those structures and that type of thing. And so I I'm very cautious about those. I'm leading on the side that they are completely false and incorrect. But the most famous scan before those LiDAR scans was the muon technology scans from the Scan Pyramid project, and they're the ones that saw the large void associated with the Grand Gallery, and there was a smaller void by the entrance of the Great Pyramid above the chevrons that you can see. And so what the Scan project people said was, we have an anomaly in our data that we've collected, and that indicates that there could be something in those two areas. That's much better than talking about those spiral staircases that look like pogo sticks, type of thing. They're getting ahead of themselves. So, but ultimately, the small void, they drilled a little hole and was able to put a camera up there and take pictures of it. So that gives a lot of credence to the idea that there's a big void. But these LiDAR scans that rely on micro vibrations and analyzed with AI, believe it or not, and I just don't trust them, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm not reserving judgment, but I think that they are more than likely false. They're using micro vibrations detected from satellites using LiDAR. Well, LiDAR is fantastic. It's discovered, a lot of structures in the Amazon, but LiDAR technology doesn't go deep.
Correct.
It can look through vegetation, but it doesn't go down into the ground very far, just feet, like 10 feet, and then it doesn't work anymore. So they don't have data below that using LiDAR, but they've cooked the books a little bit and then come up with all of these massive 2-mile deep structures.
Yeah.
And also, last time I was at Egypt, I led a tour a 13-day tour and all of that, and it was fun, and we went to all the sites. But they have those buses coming, all, huge buses, 2-story buses that you go in with tourists, and that would create a lot of micro vibrations in and of itself that would be error up and something that would create an error. So I
think that's fair.
am skeptical.
Yeah.
That's okay. Researchers are like doctors. You ask a doctor, why does it hurt? And he'll give you what's called an opinion.
Yeah.
And then you're invited to get different opinions. And that's what researchers do, Egyptologists and everything else. Egyptologists look at the direct physical evidence and provide an opinion. Sometimes they, you would think that they would, substantiate their opinion with a demonstration, but it's not going to happen and never will. So, but no, I don't think that those scans will. I want to be known for saying the scans are flawed. If those structures exist, then that means I am an incompetent researcher. But that holds true for the people that say those scans show that those structures exist. And if it's determined that they don't, then they are incompetent researchers.
That's correct. And I think that's completely fair for you to be skeptical. I'm in the same boat. And I know that the one Italian scientist does work with the military using this stuff. And so he's like very much on board. Obviously, it's his scans and his idea and things like that. So, of course, he's going to be all for it. But, you have to show us a little bit more. You got to show us something that find a structure that you could easily get to that shows that the rest of your stuff may be, legitimate. But, I mean, you could say a giant flying saucer is underneath the Great Pyramid of Giza, but unless you can show us, it's like, so I think you're right on that.
That's true. There's been a lot of scans, and some contradict other scans. They don't complement each other.
Correct.
There was a scan in the 80s that produced a blurry picture. Okay. And then that blurry picture was decided to show an internal spiral ramp. And oh boy, 20 years. Oh yeah, it's there. We've seen it. It was scanned. It's right there. Well, the next scan was the Pyramid Scan Project, which has some credulity to it, if you will, and it didn't detect the internal spiral ramp. So that scan, the Pyramid Scan Project, seems to be an evidence that the internal spiral ramp doesn't exist. So, the Great Pyramid's an ancient structure, but it's still, in contemporary news and giving up its secrets very slowly.
Yeah, it really seems weird, like how the mainstream, whatever you want to consider that, media or Egyptologist or whoever, it's like one of these ideas comes out, it's almost like they pick and choose what they run with. Oh yeah, there's your spiral, your spiral ramp. And without asking any deeper questions about it, they just accept it and let that go on. And it's just weird how how can nobody go there and see people with a pounding stone demonstrate pounding out any type of limestone, let's say in Egypt, and nobody go, how did their hands handle that all the time? How could they be working all the time? I mean, wouldn't their hands be just completely destroyed? And isn't copper like a softer metal? And but nobody questions that.
Yeah, I mean,
researchers like you do, but I don't know
how they get away with it, to be honest with you. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. It's just it's the nature of the human condition, though.
Yeah.
And then departments of Egyptology that are in uh, universities now. How sad, how sad. That would be like having a department of phrenology, the study of the bumps on people's heads.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have a department of phrenology in our university, and but they have each. I think it's a money thing, and it's an inertia thing. It takes. It just takes enough people
Yeah.
to die off,
Another
and
40
then
years.
so that's what it is. So it's terrible. Could you imagine getting, let's say, Boston University, which has a Department of Egyptology? Shame on them. Can you imagine getting a geology degree from a university that gives out degrees for Egyptology? I'm really glad I don't have a degree from the Boston University, because if I did, it would reduce my credulity.
Well, it's like Michelle and I are both teachers, and we went to school for 4 years. Michelle did her master's, she went 6 years, and it's like you can go through these classes and spend a semester, and that's maybe 2.5 months, and then you do 4 years, you come out with your bachelor's, you're like, yay, I'm ready to teach, and then you step foot in the classroom, and nothing prepares you for what's about to happen to you. And I feel that's the same with everything, except maybe like a trade school or something like that, where you actually have to go and build and learn how to build things or repair things with your hands, right? But a lot of this stuff, like you're saying with Egyptology, being taught at Boston University, it's like, really now? So you're just learning what other people are spouting. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that, and I think the money thing is probably a pretty big deal.
It is.
They don't want to solve. They don't want to solve problems.
No, and it's they're all professors write a book, and that's their textbook, and they're not going to say, oh yeah, basically everything in my textbook is wrong, and if they did, that would improve or pursue the pursuit of truth, but they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So it's just humans. It's just the way humans are. It's a sad kettle of fish that way.
Yeah.
But I do want to commend both of you on your service, being on the front lines, if you will,
middle school
as a teachers. So, I mean, man, I commend you, but do not envy you. But we're all teachers and trying to spread information the best we can with what we have to work with.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it makes me think about a recent thing that happened to me just last week. I had to go to the doctor's appointment. They're checking my blood pressure. I'm on blood pressure meds, just like everybody else for the most part, especially in your 50s and all that good stuff. And I'm on blood pressure meds, and he's like, well, we're going to give you a little extra, another blood pressure med to take to just bring that number down a little bit. Well, okay. Can you tell me how to fix the problem? Why do I have this in the first place? Shouldn't you be telling me how to get off of these drugs so I don't need to be on them the rest of my life? But it's not about that. It's like, well, we're going to react right now. We're going to give you more pills. You're going to spend more money. I'm going to get more kickbacks. And don't worry about it. Don't worry about the pill will take care of everything. And I'm just shaking my head. And that's what a lot of this feels like.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar feel to it.
Yeah.
The United States spends the most money on medical care, and we're the least healthy industrialized nation in the world. So it's really strange.
Yeah.
Not to say anything, but our medical care in the United States is you drive up to Canada to get your medications, and then you go down to Mexico to get your teeth fixed. And if you have a major hip surgery, then you do what they call medical tourism. You fly to India and get your hip repaired, and that's That's the medical situation in the United States.
Yeah.
Don't forget Brazil for a facelift.
Hey, there you go. Yeah. I'm I don't even think that'd help me, but yeah. But isn't it strange?
It is. It's really strange.
Yeah, things aren't the open-minded pursuit of truth, and will the purpose of medicine is to actually help your health. It's more complicated than that. The purpose of Egyptology is to seek truth. It's a lot different than that. But it's strange. But we think that the Great Pyramid helped people. It provided prosperity for the civilization that built it. The Grand Coulee Dam, which is my favorite dam, on the Columbia River out here I'm in Oregon, but it's in central Washington. It was the biggest thing ever built by humans when it was built in the 30s. And they didn't build it, to point to a star, to put Roosevelt's body in or anything like that. They didn't do that, but it provided huge amount of prosperity. We've all ate apples that were irrigated by the Grand Coulee Dam, and the electricity was used in the war effort in World War II. And along the Columbia River, they had cheap hydroelectric power, so there was a lot of aluminum production, there, and just the benefit was monstrous. And the Great Pyramid had a huge cost, but even bigger return on investment. So if people tell you a reason why they built the Great Pyramid and it has a small return on investment, it has to be incorrect, because those who built it were geniuses. And
what about the rest of the plateau? Like, how did all those other ones play a part in that hypothesis of the water pump?
Well, the focus of my research is the Great Pyramid. So there are other pyramids that are physically pretty close to the Great Pyramid.
Right.
They have a different design, a different structure, a different degree of precision, and that type of thing. The pumped water from the Great Pyramid could have been used to build the pyramid next to it. But those pyramids, the sequence of construction is under scholarly debate. If people like us think the Great Pyramid was built 12,000 years ago, those other pyramids could have been built 4,000 years ago, 4,500. So then even though they're physically close, they don't really have a relationship. They're not built by the same civilization. So the sequence and timeline of pyramid construction is certainly under scholarly debate.
Yeah.
But let's say a big leader in ancient Egypt attributed his grandness to the Great Pyramid that pre-existed for 8,000 years. It was there for 8,000 years, but then the leader, like all leaders do, they say, I take credit for that, if you will. Well, his son might say, well, I want one of them too. And, leaders like expensive things, and they have this big structure, and it, lends credence to their grandeur and their ability. So people have suggested that it's like a cargo cult, which in the Pacific during World War I, but mostly World War II, the isolated tribes, witness all these big ships and tanks and everything show up, and they become, they worship these advanced people. And the idea of cargo cults is quite interesting. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they and then they made like airplanes out of palm branches and crates and that type of thing, trying to woo the gods back.
Yep.
And the cargo, spam and canned food and comic books or whatever, and that type of thing. So it's still a strong religion in the Pacific Islands, cargo cults. very strange. Their god is John from, because when they would meet the the soldiers, he would say, I'm John from whatever. So
Yep.
it's quite interesting, and people just if those if those isolated tribes saw the Piltdown skull and they were told it was valid, they would believe it till the day they die. So they see those cargo cults and religion, falsehoods, and those things die very slowly.
Yeah.
Falsehoods or lies can go all the way around the world before the truth can get its pants on. That's a quote from Mark Twain. So that's why the news picks up on these weird ideas and never really looks into it, like you were talking about earlier.
Well, you mentioned somebody's name earlier, Robert Bauval, and he had the Orion correlation theory was his idea. And you have a challenge to that, or at least you don't think that theory holds up. What's your basis for that?
Well, the Orion correlation theory is a correlation between the stars and pyramids and stuff. It's the second correlation theory associated with the Great Pyramid. The first one is the biblical correlation theory that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And both of those theories use very similar research methods. They say that the pyramids look like these stars, so then there must be an intended relationship. Well, looking like something is a very poor research method. I saw a cloud that looked like a puppy dog. So did the cloud configure itself to look like puppy dogs, or did canines evolve so it could look like that cloud? See, there's no intended relationship.
Right.
It's that relationship is created using invalid research methods. And then they say the vents point to certain stars, but the vents don't point to those stars. Every 72 years, the sky moves 1 degree. So those vents point away from those stars. But people say, well, they used to point to those stars. Well, they used to point to thousands of different stars. So is used to pointing to stars a valid research method?
Right.
It's strange. And then, of course, the correlations don't have causation.
Yeah, exactly.
They never even talk about it. Whole books about correlations don't talk about causation.
Yeah.
It's just strange. So I think that I do think that it is a flawed theory. They think that precision validates a correlation. Precision doesn't validate a correlation. You can just cherry pick 2 numbers or 2 concepts, and the math adds up or whatever. And no, there's a mathematical correlation between global warming and the number of pirates. There's been a decrease in the number of pirates in the last 500 years, and there's been an increase in global warming. So there's an inverse relationship between those 2 things. They teach that in universities just to show that math alone doesn't validate correlations. There's a website called Spurious Correlations that has untold thousands and thousands of correlations that are mathematically precise, and they have graphs and everything else, but they're not related. Like the number of murders in a particular state with the consumption of ice cream. Those 2 things correlate, but there's no causation between the 2. So, it's sad. And the another indicator that it is a flawed research method, a flawed theory, is they don't talk about research methods at all. They will not. I try to entice someone who believes that theory, why those correlations that they think are true are valid. Why? But they won't talk about it. So,
well, the why is probably that the story is very, very enticing, and it's very
enticing.
Yeah, that's probably the why. Is like, boy, this is really cool.
It's very compelling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very compelling.
And this kind of goes to T-Bone ask a question here. He says, why do most pyramids seem, and T-Bone, I'm going to underline that for you, seem to be star aligned? That doesn't really mean anything. I mean, he just kind of talked about
you cherry pick certain stars and then cherry pick certain configuration of pyramids and then think, Shazam, there's a correlation.
right.
But all hydroelectric dams have passages that point to stars. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Anything that points up points to stars.
Or maybe a star
and
that used to be there.
Yeah, it's just, but is there an intended relationship?
Right.
The Statue of Liberty has 7 spikes in the crown, which all point to stars. But nobody came up with a Statue of Liberty star correlation theory because there's no intended relationship.
Yeah.
But being compelling is not a good research method.
No.
Ask people who believe the Bible Great Pyramid correlations. They are compelling. They are mathematically precise, and all of that. So compelling is a very poor research method.
Yeah. A good, it tells a good story is not form and function. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't hold up scientifically. I'll tell you something compelling. There was this artifact found called the Piltdown skull, and it was compelling. Just, oh man, it had like the head of a man, and then it looked like a jaw of an ape. Man, it is so compelling that it must be true. Yeah, being compelling doesn't cut the mustard.
And
in the real world.
Considering what Michelle and I talk about on this show, we've been talking about alien abductions and alien spacecraft and all this stuff, especially like the ones that we've seen. And one of the things that you're making me think about right now are those mummies that they found down in Peru that seem to, they're tridactyl. They have the 3 fingers, the heads, and then they're trying to do some real good scientific study on those. But yeah, I'm kind of concerned that again we're going to end up with the story being whatever the stories they're going to come up with is going to be the lead thing instead of like research modalities, like having good research done to figure out what's going on here. And it's just, I don't know. As a science teacher, it boggles my mind that we talk about, like I yell at my students all the time. I go, why do you think the plates move? Can you tell me what? Well, I feel that the plate, no, I don't want to know feeling. I want to know what is your evidence that the plates are moving. We talk about this stuff. Don't tell me you feel, because that means you're just searching for an answer that you feel is correct. And that's not what you're supposed to do with good science. And
you mean the tectonic plates? Yeah. That the idea of the tectonic plates was first developed by Albert Wagner?
Yes.
Quite a while ago. Continental drift is what he called it.
Yep.
Well, he was a meteorologist, not a geologist. Well, the science of geology destroyed him. They eviscerated him and rejected his research. The plates don't move. There's no movement of the plates. And then about 30 years later or so, geology came up with exactly the same thing, but they called it a fancier name, plate tectonics. But that's interesting.
And you're correct. I mean, they eviscerated that poor guy. He finished off any of his science work doing weather station work in the Arctic Circle. I mean, the guy couldn't find any work or anything because the geology, the Society of Geologists or whatever it was at the time, they asked him a simple question, and unfortunately simple for us now, but he didn't have an answer because they asked him, well, what is the mechanism that would be making these plates move? And he had no answer. Now we know there's convection currents of warm, warm and hot things moving, cooling,
Mhm,
dropping
mhm.
back down, and it creates these little conveyor.
Right. Yeah.
But
He didn't have an answer for the cause, but
correct.
he acknowledged that the plates were moving,
Yep.
and geology struggled with that.
Yeah.
But
Well, they don't want a
that
weatherman telling them
yeah,
geology.
yeah. I mean, that's yeah. He they said he's outside of the field. He can't have an opinion about geology.
Right.
It's that happened with there's this other guy who said, there's that bread mold. I think I can make sick people well with
Right.
that. And that was Alexander Fleming. I actually went to Alexander Fleming Junior High, named after him. But the science community rejected penicillin. They said, oh, it's too expensive. They said it didn't work. They said, you're a botanist. You have nothing to do with medicine. So how can you come up with something? And on and on and on. And finally, the military community sought out penicillin, and it was developed to be mass produced, and the sulfur drugs, because they were people that existed in the real world, the military, and they knew that they were going to need to make injured people well again.
Yeah.
So, so it's interesting. And it's happened all through time. That type of thing. Galileo is another famous example of that type of thing. The Earth goes around the sun, and he was put on house arrest for the rest of his life for that type of thing. And that's the type of thing these closed societies do instead of pursue open-minded research. And Egyptology is the worst about circling the wagons and that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I know that the Great Pyramid is like your focus on your study and stuff, but do you have an opinion on the precision of these vases and different like jars and things that they have been finding, and they are like turned on a lathe? You can tell, they're doing all this microscopy type of material, and looking at them, and the who's the precision guy?
Christopher Dunn.
Christopher Dunn, yeah, him and his son, and the
Yeah.
metrology, the measurement of these things, and
Yeah.
the lack of error.
Yeah, I
in
read his last book, and his third book, and
Yeah.
he discusses that quite a bit. You want to know what I think?
Yeah.
Well, it's really hard stone, but they got these copper chisels. And then they went,
these big stones, right?
yeah. And then on the inside, and then they got, and I can prove it because I can go down to any library on earth and pull the book out, and the experts, it's right there. They say it right there.
Right.
But
right.
no, what it is, it's high technology. They had the ability, whoever they are, probably, it's hard to say if it was 4,500 years ago or pre-biblical flood or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Somebody had high technology that wanted a vase, and they made the vases very precise because that's what they wanted to do. And they are very precise, and they, it is just a linchpin on how flawed Egyptology is.
Yes.
to continue to maintain that it was done in some primitive manner. But if they could demonstrate it, poof, Christopher Dunn's gone.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
But they get away with it. It's but I think they had a high technology, whoever they are, in science, metallurgy, communications, probably electronics. That's kind of my thing. But they also, in metallurgy, chemistry, logistics, they knew. But all of that stuff doesn't last through the language, religion, culture. Trade, all of that doesn't last 10,000 years. That's all of that's lost to the sands of time. But the big structure, like the pyramid, it has survived.
Yeah.
And if it didn't, it would be considered a myth.
Yeah.
Oh no, they didn't have great big casing stones that were precision made on it. It'd be just like a story.
Well,
But but all of that's gone. It's lost to the sands of time. Their high technology.
well, and T-Bone brings up something here. He says the fallen ones, and that makes me think of like when we were talking about a cargo cult. What if all of this stuff is just all of the religious stuff that we have is just a cargo cult of they're trying to pass on information after some type of massive disaster, and it's all been interpreted in the wrong way, and it's just all of this religion, the Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran, all of these things, all of it is just a misinterpretation, and we're just a big cargo cult ourselves.
Well, you could say that, and that's fine and whatever. But I'm more pragmatic. Getting back to big heavy payloads removed from one place to another
Yeah.
and stacked in a certain way for some sort of a purpose. So there's no gods involved or whatever on that. I mean, you could say ancient aliens provided the technology or built the Great Pyramid so they could find their way home or whatever. But that, the flip side of that coin is to say the ancient people in the Valley of the Nile were too stupid to build the Great Pyramid.
Right.
And, those two things go hand in hand. And that's, my idea is that ancient people in the Valley of the Nile were geniuses. And they had a big reason to expend a lot of resources to build this big structure. And probably being geniuses, it had a big return on investment. And a lot of people don't like that. You'd be surprised. I'm going to say it. The people in the Valley of the Nile are Africans. And a lot of people are against the idea that Africans, ancient or modern, were geniuses. And I'm going to say that. And a lot of people take offense to that. But I think that in the Valley of the Nile, they probably had a wise leader. They probably had an industrial or technology base. They probably had someone like Nikola Tesla and Victor Schauberger. Those people in one generation, they figured out awesome technologies. And people with logistics and that type of thing.
I mean, we know
and
they
built
weren't
their massive prosperity machine.
Yeah, well, we know they weren't much different than us. I mean, same brain size, same, so why wouldn't they? I mean,
Yeah, the same. Yeah, I'm not. I don't think that we have evolved from them. Okay, so they had the same wants, needs, and desires. They had the same goals that we have. I know what my goal is. My goal was that my kids could eat today. That was my goal. And I want to have it pretty much reliable that they'll be able to eat tomorrow. I want to be able to heat my home, and that type of thing. And those things are prosperity. We live in the United States and we're inundated with prosperity. So we it's like a goldfish, wouldn't be able to describe water because they're just inundated by it. But, we have clean water to drink, which requires electricity. We have sewer systems. We have the power grids. We have all of those things to pursue our wants, needs, and desires. We want to transform toil into leisure. We want to transform the desert into a garden. All of those things. We want to have a stable civilization to live in. And the Great Pyramid prosperity machine did all those things by pumping water.
Yeah. Well, people out there in chat, if you we're almost at an hour and 25 minutes already. If you want to ask a question, please put it into chat, put it all in caps. And while you guys are thinking of a question, and we'll keep Stephen around for, I don't know, another 8 minutes or so. quick questions for you as we start to close out, Stephen. Do you have any appearances or conferences you would like to let people know about coming up?
Right now, I don't. I live in southwestern Oregon, kind of the outskirts, if you will. I don't. I can't live there in Detroit or Chicago or any of those places. So a lot of the concerts are pretty far away. I'm a humble researcher, that type of thing. So I don't have anything scheduled right now. I'm doing quite a few talk shows, which is much easier to accommodate.
Yeah.
Like this, what a tremendous opportunity and that type of thing. But if somebody wants a guest, that has my kind of line of thinking, and they can certainly contact me through my website at thepump.org. You can see our video series about how the Great Pyramid was built. Also, our video series on how it pumped water, how the features in the Great Pyramid support the idea of a water pump. It's like a machine. There's much different than a tomb, if you will, an ineffective tomb that didn't work, if you will. And of course, I've written some books, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, how the Great Pyramid was built. And then the research is sort of divided into how and why. So I wrote this book, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, Why the Great Pyramid Was Built. And a couple of other books. You can find out about all that on the website at thepump.org and contact me, find out what our foundation is doing, our research goals, our activities, and that type of thing. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, so.
Yeah, I see T-Bone says that he wants you to go on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott.
Great.
Yeah, there you go. So
tell him about me, and I would appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. T-Bone, let Dave know about getting an email and setting something up with Stephen. That would be awesome.
Thank you, T-Bone.
Yep, T-Bone is awesome. Do you have any connections to Michigan before we take off?
I don't. I'm kind of a West Coast guy, so I don't get out that way. I go to Spokane.
No relatives or anything
there.
Yeah,
but I have more connection with Egypt than I do central United States. The last time I was there, I did the tour. I led a tour, and it was quite interesting. It's a wonderful place, Egypt. It's very safe. Safer than, I'm going to say it, safer than Chicago and some places in the United States. But they accommodate tourists. The money exchange rate makes things in Egypt relatively cheap. So, and everyone speaks English. If all three of us spoke German and you went to Egypt, they'd all speak German. Herodotus in the 5th century BC was essentially a tourist and got the tour. So there's no place like Egypt. So if you get a chance, I recommend going to Egypt.
So do you put on like tours and stuff like some of the other guys like Ben or Brian Forrester and all those guys? They make a business out of that.
There is a business side. I actually worked with another person, Ramona Miles, who has a website, lifealongthenile.com.
Okay.
And she is, I think she's still an American citizen, but lives in Egypt and was the boots on the ground. I co-led it with her, if you will.
Okay.
And we worked together, different ideas about the same direct physical evidence. And it was a wonderful tour. We did there's just so many sites you can see. We did all the major ones, including the High Aswan Dam, the largest structure in the Valley of the Nile. Yeah. And it is impressive in and of itself. But we also took a 4-day cruise down the Nile. And, the scenery was what the pharaohs would have saw, if you will. And it was marvelous. So, but no, that was just doesn't happen very often. And
Okay.
the stars aligned, if I can say that.
Like
And
the pyramids.
yeah, the scheduling for both of us worked out. But it was quite an experience, much different than just being a researcher,
Yeah.
being
A
tour
spectator.
guide, if you will. And
Yeah.
we had a lot of fun.
Sounds good. All right, Stephen. Well, I don't see any questions in chat. I think we already answered a lot of them. So we want to thank you very much for joining us tonight and sharing your research into the engineering mysteries of the Great Pyramid. So have a good night. And we want to thank you once again. And if you get a new book put together or you want to come back on the show, just drop us an email and we'll have you come back on for another discussion.
I will. And I appreciate both of you for being teachers and also for having me on your show. It means a lot to me.
Awesome.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, we do. All right. Thank you very much, Stephen. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. Well, there you go. Another one of these great conversations that remind us just how much there is still to learn about our ancient past. And I love the fact of we're sticking to, people making claims, but you got to have the evidence too. It's
evidence
reasoning. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it seems like people jump to the reasoning part first. You want to figure out the reasoning by looking at your evidence and all that. So yeah. So everybody out there, thank you for joining us tonight. It was a very interesting show. Yep, absolutely, Diane. We loved having Stephen on. And we want to say thanks to everyone watching and listening. So we'll put out the audio podcast tomorrow evening. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please help us out and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the episodes with others who love exploring UFOs, ancient mysteries, and hidden history.
Wayne, what do we have coming up next weekend?
Oh boy. Why did you have to ask me that?
I'm sorry.
Hold on. Let me.
Usually you know all of that.
I know, but with my schedule recently, it's
my
like
schedule is crazier than mine.
Yeah. Okay. So next week.
A play.
Yeah. Next week we're gonna have Ann Hatfield, and she lives or is part of a ranch that is right next door to Skinwalker Ranch. And we're going to be talking to her about all these different voices in the desert, the deer man encounter, all of this stuff, and what's going on at this other ranch that is right next to Skinwalker Ranch because, well, I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah, don't spoil it. Just
they have some interesting encounters that are going on there. And then, let's see, on the 29th of this month, we're having a woman who is born awakened. Her UFO abduction poltergeist house that she grew up in here in Lansing, Michigan, very close, and non-human intelligence encounters. Her name is Samantha Leifker. So we're going to be talking to her, and we're booked all the way into May. So we've got a lot coming up, and
we're not Easter Sunday.
Just not Easter Sunday, correct. All right, everybody. I think with that being said, we can say have a great night.
Have a great night and a great week ahead.
Yes, we're getting one step closer to spring break. And until next time, keep your eyes to that.
Still the sky.
It's still the sky. Absolutely. Did you remember to turn your microphone on?
Yes, my microphone is on.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
I'm running.